Just imagine this for a second. You wake up one morning, you go to grab your favorite newspaper, and the front page is completely blank. Then you turn on the TV, and the political leaders you see every single day, they're just gone. They vanished overnight. And maybe the most chilling part? Imagine your own opinion. The very act of speaking your mind suddenly becomes illegal. Well, this isn't some dystopian fantasy. This was reality. For 21 long months, the world's largest democracy fell silent. We're talking about the 1975 national emergency in India, one of the most defining and, without a doubt, one of the most controversial chapters in the nation's entire history. So how on earth could something like this happen? Well, to really get it, you have to rewind to the early 1970s. India was basically a perfect storm of crises: economic turmoil, massive social unrest, and political instability. It was a pressure cooker just waiting to explode. Okay, so let's just walk through this timeline really quick. In 1971, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi is a national hero after leading India to a huge victory over Pakistan. But just a few short years later, by early 75, the country is in chaos. And then it all comes to a head in June of that year, leading to the declaration of the emergency. It would be nearly 2 years before democracy was finally restored in March of 1977. I mean, just look at this contrast. It's truly night and day. The Indira Gandhi of 1971 was celebrated, seen as the creator of Bangladesh, at the absolute peak of her power. But by 1975, she was an embattled leader, fighting off huge protests and facing really serious accusations of corruption. The pressure was just unbelievable. And this was the moment that changed everything. On June 12th, the Allahabad High Court dropped a bombshell. It found Indira Gandhi guilty of electoral malpractice. And this wasn't just some small fine. The ruling invalidated her election, which meant she legally had to step down as prime minister. Of course, the opposition pounced, demanding her resignation immediately. India's democracy was right at a crossroads. So, with her back against the wall, Indira Gandhi made a decision that would alter the course of Indian history forever. What followed was a swift and absolutely shocking suspension of democracy. Now, to do this, the government used a specific provision in the Indian Constitution, Article 352. It allows for a national emergency to be declared in the face of a major threat. And the official reason they gave on the paperwork? Internal disturbance. And just like that, in the dead of night, the president signed the order. So while the entire nation was sleeping, its fundamental freedoms were literally being stripped away. The next morning, people woke up to a totally different country, a democracy, but a democracy without freedom. The next 21 months were a dark and harsh reality for the Indian people. The government wasted no time at all consolidating its power and crushing anyone who dared to oppose it. The clampdown was immediate and it was sweeping. Political opponents, including some of the country's biggest leaders, were arrested in midnight raids. The press was put under severe censorship. Fundamental rights were just suspended, and a climate of fear and silence fell over the entire nation. But even in that silence, there were incredible acts of defiance. Newspapers like the Indian Express, unable to print the truth, chose to print nothing. They left their editorial columns completely blank. It was a silent but incredibly powerful protest against the muzzling of the free press. And to really understand the sheer totality of the government's control, you have to know about habeas corpus. It's a fundamental legal right that protects every citizen from being unlawfully detained. It's why the government can't just lock you up and throw away the key. Well, during the emergency, they suspended it. This meant there was no legal way for anyone to challenge their own arrest. People could be jailed indefinitely, with no questions asked. As the prime minister consolidated all this power, another figure began to rise to prominence: her younger son, Sanjay Gandhi. Now, get this. He held no official elected position whatsoever, and yet he became one of the most powerful and, frankly, feared people in the country, wielding enormous influence over national policy with zero accountability. Sanjay launched his own 5-point program. And on paper, it looked great. It was promoting things like family planning, literacy, planting trees, and ending social evils. But one of those points had a horrifying reality hidden just behind the friendly name. That family planning initiative became a brutal campaign of forced sterilizations. Men, especially the poor and powerless, were rounded up from their homes, from their jobs, even pulled off of buses, and then sterilized against their will in shockingly unhygienic conditions. It was coercion on a massive scale, and it left behind a terrible legacy of trauma and death. But after nearly 2 years of this authoritarian rule, the regime was about to face its ultimate test. In a move that absolutely stunned the nation, in January 1977, Indira Gandhi suddenly lifted the emergency and called for elections. Why she did it is still debated, but many believe that her intelligence reports convinced her that the people would overwhelmingly vote her back into power. She was about to find out she was very, very wrong. The people of India, who had been silenced for 21 long months, finally had their chance to speak. And they didn't just speak, they roared. The result was a historic landslide victory for the opposition. For the very first time since independence, the ruling Congress Party was voted out of power. The system had been pushed to its absolute limit. Civil liberties were gone, institutions had been compromised, and fear had reigned supreme. But in the end, the democratic spirit of the people prevailed. It came back battered, for sure, but it was not broken. The emergency serves as this constant, stark reminder of just how fragile democratic institutions can be. In its aftermath, crucial amendments were actually passed to the Constitution to make sure no future government could misuse Article 352 in the same way. It remains a permanent scar on India's democracy, but it's also a permanent lesson. And that really raises a fundamental question, and not just for India, but for any democracy. The threat didn't come from a foreign power. It came from inside the system itself. And that forces us all to ask, how vigilant must we be to protect our democracy from ourselves?